Okay. With that said, we will close public comment. Mr. Sherlett, you had a question for staff.
Have we received input from any of the other neighbors? I assume we sent out a letter, is that
Yes.
correct? Standard procedure?
Only the two that were in your packet.
Yes.
Only the two comments that were in your packet.
Okay.
So any other questions for staff, or we'll just move to deliberation? Question. Go ahead.
I have wondering if the Tuckers would sell off their property to that to create a flag lot. Is there enough square footage for both, for two houses there to meet the requirement of 7,000 square feet?
I didn't do the calculations on there, but how many square feet was the 14?
Yeah,
So just barely would
Yeah,
make.
two.
yeah. But
If there's a question for you, we sort of
okay.
allow quite
So,
commission
so
to answer.
the way their house is situated, it's to the front of the parcel.
Right.
So there's nothing in the back. So you can put the line at 7,000 off of their far back line, so that they had 7,000 back, and then I think it was over, it's like 14.5, I think is the number. So there's plenty of square footage.
Now, that would not include the easement back to it.
Yeah, the 7,000 has to be the buildable portion of the flag lot. The access doesn't count,
Okay.
and yeah, it's there.
Any other questions? Okay. Let's close the question and comment period, public comment, and we will just move to deliberation. My initial thoughts on this is, that generally these things are good. It's good to have infill, and people can use their property for the benefits. The thing that I'd like to hear from other commissioners on that troubles me, and I'll stop after that, because that's really the only thing that troubles me, is the 3 lots and the creation of 3 lots, whatever it's 16, 17,000 square feet divided by 3 doesn't average out at 7,000. And that's what troubles me when I fundamentally believe he could do it with an easement rather than 3 lots. Doing it with 2 lots and an easement rather than, and when I read our code 1616030B, the average area of all lots created through the subject land division, excluding required public park and land dedications, it's not a public park land dedication, surface water management facilities, it's not a surface water management facility, and similar public use areas, it's not a public use area, shall be no less than 7,000 square feet and no greater than 10,000 square feet. I'm not really sure. I like to help people get accomplished what they want to get accomplished, but I'm not sure how we could be in compliance with that if it's 3 lots and they're be averaged out at greater than 7,000. So that's what I'm troubled with, and maybe somebody's got a theory that can shed some light on my brain here.
I might interject just real quick before you get the rest of the commissioners. That was definitely staff's concern.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And, at the pre-application meeting, it took quite a lot of discussion and convincing, and that's where we directed him to go find out under what circumstances the county would record a plat to make sure that the assessor's office didn't think we were creating a buildable tract, because obviously Parcel 3 is not a buildable tract, and we didn't want anybody to mistake it to be a buildable tract in the future. And so that's where we came up with this idea that just label it right on the plat, unbuildable lot. And but it is, I would say this is an unusual request, since he's trying to do something out in the future, which he doesn't really control today. But we worked with him in this manner and thought that it could potentially work, but it does have the impact of a lot less than the standard size.
Discussion, comments, thoughts?
I have a problem with the square footage thing too, and the possibility of that being a flag lot. There's just so many questions there and things that I really have a problem with that. I mean, if there was a guarantee that they was going to sell that property and that could be a buildable lot now, then I can see it. But not knowing that, and those people aren't ready to sell, and putting that as a possibility, I really have problems with that. And especially then too, we're making an adjustment for property size on partial 1 because it's not meeting our requirement. I really have a problem with that.
I will remind you one more time that he did have 2 alternative plans, and he may be, you'll have to talk with the applicant, willing to consider one of those alternative layouts that actually meets the lot size.
But as a way that stands right now,
But then we're into an irregular lot. That's
Right, and they're not so irregular that staff would say you couldn't approve them. We just felt like rectangular lots are more standard, but there are many examples of lots that are irregular in shape. As long as the connection to the public street is at a right angle, which on both examples they are. On one of them, it's just a short distance though, and then it takes a curve. So one may be better than the other.
The point that I had made earlier was just like the gentleman applicant had said, oh, this house can use this 20-foot strip here for a backyard or a side yard, and while it's undeveloped. Well, that's essentially the same thing that could be done if you did an irregular lot line with that. It's just called an easement. That's what it is. It would be an easement for, easements don't have to be for utility lines. An easement could be for a garden. You could give somebody a gardening easement over your property, and then you could run a straight fence line down the line, and it's just recorded that forevermore this lot would be able to use that property even though they don't technically own it. Just an idea that I threw out there, but could make it comply with the square footage requirements.
We were on the same page in that parcel 3 just seems like it should be an easement, and everybody, the applicant agrees too, but he couldn't make that work with the county. They wouldn't accept dedicating an easement, and whether that's needs more research or talk to somebody other than the county, but the county's the one that controls recording the plat, and if they're not going to record it with his proposed easement on there that is benefiting some other property, not himself, then we thought it was a no-go, because we don't want to go through the process of approving something that the county won't record.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why I was saying if he had that piece of property and then add the easement to it, I can see it. But as it stands right now, and there's a good possibility that those people would not sell that for 10 years, then that reverts back to that, and you got another whole ball game thing of, what do we do here now? So I have a problem with that.
I'm skeptical that would be the county's final answer if we're on a quiz show here. Because, for instance, they're certainly willing to record a utility easement right along there that's not being used. It's not touching anything. It's a future use easement. And those things get recorded all the time. You can record... I just am very skeptical of what the surveyor apparently told this gentleman. Until... It makes me concerned about what's going on here with this thing.
And another thing, he plans on selling that property, and then he has no right to that unless it's recorded that that's an easement. If he sells that property to other people.
You mean parcel?
Partial 2.
Parcel 2.
Yeah, so he sells partial 2, partial 3, then, like we were saying earlier, they might not want that piece because it would add to their taxes and all that at the end of the 10 years if this other thing doesn't turn out.
So let me ask you a question. Would you be open to considering exploring more options if the commission was to, in some form or fashion, delay or table this public hearing and get, maybe consider more options to bring to us about whether you wanted to go with one of the alternative boundary line configurations or an easement instead?
Okay, so I think there's two different things there. There's the parcel one. If you prefer it with the dog leg in the back, and I make that an easement, I'm okay. I go with 1, 2, or 3 on those options. I went with staff in that, to me, it makes a nice clean line. And if we're going to get to that nice clean line in a nice rectangular shape by doing the dog leg and an easement, or doing the dog leg and forget the easement, I mean, I've done it. I've done the dog leg before. I don't like the backyard that it creates.
Mhm.
So, if we could, I mean, there's exceptions in the code that allows less than 7,000 square feet, and I think part of it is the benefit that the city gets from it. Lots that are more regular shaped. But I'm open to do whatever you want to do to make that lot happen. Parcel one. If you think that it's a better look for the city to have the dog leg or the jog around the house, I'm okay with that. And then parcel 3, I've talked to my civil engineer, Pat Sissel, in regards to that, and also the county. And both gave me the same story. So I'm not sure where else to go if there's another answer. But usually, like when you were talking about the utility easements, so like you give the easement for utility and you say this utility easement benefits the utility provider. So that easement, if that was parcel 3 was an easement, it would have to say this easement is access and utility easement benefiting 1065 North Maple Street. It doesn't benefit me per se. You can't give it to, I don't know how they said that, but you can't just give it to a person and then they can do with it what they want.
Okay, any other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would be interested to know, is there any other property in this area that's under the 7,000 square feet? I mean, we
I
don't know
couldn't
that.
tell you that right
No,
now, you know.
I know, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because if there was, then I could see an exception, that there is other property in that area that is under the 7,000. But if there isn't, then I don't think it's fair to all the other neighbors to allow that to happen too.
Say Oak Circle, which is just down the street,
All right.
all those are under 7,000.
No, no.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure. Yeah, my mom lives there, so I know the.
We would have to check the zoning on that, though.
yeah.
Okay, let's go back to discussion.
Okay, well,
Deliberation.
I have no problem with parcel 3. I think you've done your due diligence in trying to work a good solution there. And it looks to me like you're amenable to a variety of different methodologies for coming up with the sufficient square footage on parcels 1 and 2. And but the straight line option, which was recommended by staff, obviously doesn't meet that requirement. So the fact that you're willing to go either way on that, just to make it work, I'm good with that. So yeah, that's all. I'm good with the plan. I have no problem with how you've set up parcel 3.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll chime in here at this point, I think. So, I'm still not grasping, and maybe somebody can educate me on this, as to if the code states that all the 3 lots, so my understanding is there's 3 lots here, they have to average 7,000 feet. By my math, the 3 of them together is 18,000 feet. So we'd be talking about a variance there, and if I'm missing something, please correct me. So we're not just talking about lot 1, but we're talking about really all 3 lots aren't averaging the 7,000 feet as required by the way I'm reading the code. So that's an issue. Second, the driveway distances. I get that there's a difference in the code, but which one trumps, the city code or the utilities code? Generally speaking, it's the more conservative of the 2, correct?
That's our job, to make interpretations of the code.
Right, so it's
So-
just somewhat of a,
You're in charge of that.
well, it's somewhat of a loaded question, I get that, but, you know, my understanding is the city kind of out trumps the utilities and what they're calling for. I don't like what I call rather uncharacteristic absorption process of Lot 3 if in 10 years from now something doesn't happen up there. That creates, in my opinion, something that, to quote you, Mr. Chair, is not quite sure that that's legal. And so it kind of seems to open up a Pandora's box there, perhaps, down the road. So, and I think most of the people here understand I'm kind of this might be the Marine in me, but I'm somewhat of a black and white guy, and that this is what it states, that's what we should pertain to, unless there's a benefit, a public benefit, which I'm not seeing at this point. I also feel as if we kind of set the precedent with regards to our views on making amendments to properties that aren't ours or somebody else's with regards to the city library, when we talked about whether or not we should be talking about instilling things for future development for things that aren't owned by people with that future development, which was one of the big topics that we discussed, and was one of the major reasons as to why it was turned down by this body. So I may be a little off base here, but I personally put this in that same view, in that we're making a special case for a couple of amendments in the code to allow for something that may or may not happen down the road and does not belong to necessarily the individual who's requesting this amendment to be done. So I'm having a little difficulty as to how we can justify making amendments to, or making variances to the code to accept this if, one, the 3 lots together don't make up enough to make even the average to be 21,000, let alone the 2 that we talked about, which would be actually lots. And then you're just inside where, although it does say in black and white, but we're just inside of the, you know, public benefit must be demonstrated in order to allow more than 10% of the lots to be outside of the minimum and maximum lot areas in subsection 16.16.03A, and that's 16.16.30B number 2, just in case anybody's going to be coded there. So like I said, I'm more of a black and white kind of guy, though. I'll be the first one to admit it. If we want to change the code, then we should change the code unless there's a public benefit to it. And I'm more apt for, especially in low-density residential, which is primarily designed for families, to have driveways that are wider apart as opposed to closer apart. My 2 cents.
Question for the applicant, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Sir, what's your intent in regard to the, if this body was to approve this and to go ahead with the project, what is your immediate intent on this access here in regard to these trees? Would they be taken out, or would they left till this property back in here was going to be developed, which is out of your control, I know?
Can you pull up the existing conditions map for the,
I guess,
This one?
yeah, that one? That shows the trees where they are. And parcel 3 doesn't look like it has any trees on it except right at the front.
Right to front. Yeah,
Right there.
right there.
And that cluster there, it was asked of me to get rid of that cluster of trees because it's in the sidewalk right away. The other ones, the back
Now, the
trees.
others seem to be back in here, as I recall from the overhead photo.
Yeah, they're right.
Is that
yeah,
these
right
here?
there. Yep. And I think that driveway is about 10 feet off of the property line, it looks like. It doesn't have it marked on there. But it's, that piece of concrete is 10 feet from the parcel 3.
That right there.
Yeah, that stays there. And I mean, it could shift over if it had to. It's not set in stone.
Thank you.
My sentiment is that I would be inclined to approve the permit with the condition that he either adjust the lot line to make it 7,000 feet on parcel 1, or that he not sever a third parcel off of the edge of parcel 2. And approve it with him making that final. I don't know. I'd like to maybe staff's input. Do you think a condition like that would even be allow? Is that concrete enough to be a final decision? If we had hypothetically saying we can approve it either if you do the meandering lot line or you only do.
Or you could approve the creation of two parcels,
Two.
not 3.
Yeah.
And you want both parcels to be a minimum of 7,000 square feet. And so that would cause a recreation of the approved drawing, but we can all imagine what that drawing would look like. It's going to be one of his other 2 alternatives without parcel 3. If you were to do both, you said or,
Yeah, could you?
and so,
And you'd have to select one for the final plot plan.
yeah, so if he went with an alternative parcel 1 arrangement, then you're going to accept parcel 3, it sounds like.
That's what, well, I'm just saying that I was just stating my position that I'd be amenable to approving it either of those 2 ways and let him finalize those details with, however he wants to go about deciding which one of those might work for him. That would overcome the obstacles that I see our code has in the way.
I think what would be helpful if you were inclined to go that way is if you choose which of the 2 alternatives that he's shown us here tonight, so that we know exactly what we're getting. The one that goes in the backyard versus the one that has 2 knobs in front of the adjacent property. I think we should pick one.
Does anybody have any thoughts about that idea? Is that something that there'd be potentially a majority in favor of, or is there nobody else even interested in that idea? Or any thoughts?
I'd entertain it.
Yeah.
I'd entertain, yeah, if the back, for the back part, not so much the jog in the front, but for the back, I have no problems with that. Yeah, like, the one to the right.
I'm trying to find the page that's on.
That's it, I think. There's their one with just 1 jog, and that one has 2 jogs.
Yeah,
Or goes around it.
that would then give partial 1 enough for a backyard for kids and stuff too, more than it would be if you went to the 2 jogs, I think.
Any other discussion on these?
I tend to agree with Mr. Joyce that we have kind of set precedent, and this parcel 3 here is my real issue.
That's fine, too.
If there could be something else worked out with that, I like the idea of the easement if that could make that happen. But really, where I get with that is that if this piece of property, there's nothing that happens with it, where does it go? I mean, you can't just force it on somebody. Is where I mean, it's kind of backwards of the library. We're going to give you property instead of make sure you have it already bought. So, but it creates an issue. I think that I don't know we want to go down this road. So really, the drawback for me isn't necessarily lot size. That is an issue, but I have more of an issue with that third parcel. That where is it going to go and how does it actually function?
Mr. Chair, that bothers me. Now, if he could get a thing from Tucker's, that they would sell that to him, and within 10 years, and then use that and develop that property within 10 years, then I don't have a problem with it. But as it sits right now, not knowing nowhere what's going to happen to that Lot 3, there's just too much up on that piece of property. And I just don't like that idea.
Is there a motion? Or it's not.
I might suggest that you ask the applicant if he's interested in seeing this approved without parcel 3, just to make sure. Just a suggestion.
Would you be interested in having this approved if parcel 3 was not approved at this time?
So it'd be a whole other partition application if that was to happen.
No, I think we could, I mean, if you're comfortable in what this would look like, all you're doing is erasing one of those property boundaries, and parcel 2 becomes the entire thing. And if you
But-
can visualize that, and if that's the direction you're thinking you're going, then I don't think he has to come back with a new application.
No, I'm saying hypothetically, if he ever wanted to, and he was ultimately convinced that the only way to get access to the north there was to go through what would have been parcel 3, he would then have to come back if he wanted to partition off that one lot.
Right, right.
But yeah, that's the answer to your question, sir, would be yes.
Well, I think, I mean, if you don't want to do, or don't want to approve parcel 3, I mean, it is what it is. It's basically, though, it shuts off future development of that lot, which does kind of go against the comprehensive plan, trying to maximize the use of the land that's within the city. So, I mean, it's kind of a gamble, I think, both sides, but, I mean, if that's the way you're leaning, then that's the way it goes.
But didn't I hear you say earlier that this property to the north could be, there was enough square footage that it could have an easement on it going back to access?
No.
I didn't hear that.
It's a narrowed lot.
It's
probably.
too narrow. The only access he would have would be that
So that is
easement
the
right
only
back there
option
to
then.
that, yeah. And,
that.
you know, and like I say, I don't have any trouble with that easement there if he had control of that property back there now, or a written statement saying that that property would sell within 10 years and then you could develop it. But as the way it is now, I mean, those people could live there 25 years. And, you know, they're young enough that they could live there 25 years, and then your 10 years are going to end up with that piece of property there, and then what do you do with it? And then you can't force it onto the people. If he sold the lot, if you still own that lot, then there would be no. But if you sell that lot too, and leave that lot 3 set there, can't see that going.
But-
The only way that I could see is that you have to own that property until this easement is put in, or you know, and you got the right of way of that property in the back.
Then aren't you condemning the Tucker's property at 14,000, is it 14,000 square feet? Is that right? That, then it's, for lack of a better term, landlocked. They would never be able to divide that into 7,000 square foot lots, because there would be no access. This is, from the drawing that I see there, there would be, never be any access to that property.
Right.
So you're stuck with that large parcel of land back there. I mean, okay, well,
Like I say, if he had access
So-
to that land now, then there would be no problem.
But
He
not
doesn't have
necessarily
it.
forever. Not necessarily forever. He could always get a real easement, because we're mixing the terms between easement and access there,
Access.
because what he's actually trying to do is have a
No.
parcel that's just dedicated for access, could potentially do that, or a traditional easement at a later time. So just, if we didn't approve that today, wouldn't necessarily mean it's foreclosed forever.
but he's not gonna own that land. I think that's his point, is that he's gonna sell parcel 2. He
Right.
won't have control over it.
That's right.
And so the new owners of parcel 2 could eventually end up asking for an easement or right, whatever it is, so that property back there could be developed. But they would cut this gentleman out completely. Is that, we're clear on that? Okay.
If he didn't reserve some sort of a right when he sold parcel 2.
Can you do that?
Yeah.
No?
I'm not his attorney, but I can tell you.
I know a good land use attorney.
Reserve a right to.
I just hate seeing the Tucker's property being, until I heard that.
There's lots of creative ways you can do things. I'm not saying for sure that any of them could happen, but there's a lot of creative ways to do things like that. So we're still at the point is that we do not have any motions on the table. The chair normally does not make motions, so somebody else would need
Mr.
to.
I don't know that we ever got an answer exactly from the applicant as to if we took parcel 3 off the table and approved a 7,000-foot lot apportionment off of that, is that something that he would be interested in us doing, or would he prefer us to maybe just take a step back and not approve anything tonight?
Yes on the first one. And that is, if you don't want to go with parcel 3, then it is what it is. So, I don't want to walk away, have nothing, so. I'd rather walk away and have,
Look at some
I would
conditions.
suggest that if somebody did make a motion in that regard, that we expressly waive, don't we have a 1-year reapplication requirement? That we expressly waive that 1-year reapplication requirement, so that if for some reason he wanted to come in earlier than that and try and do a partition of the parcel, what would have been parcel 3, for any other reason, he could do that. And then, if that was,
I'm looking for the conditions in the motion right now. They'll be out there. I just can't find them. Can you help me? Give me a spear. Okay, there we go.
Mr. Chairhouse, is there anything set that the county has said that they would not make this easement or access of that other property? Do we know that yet?
We're
Will
going
they
by
approve
what
that?
the applicant said. And basically, the benefiter, which would be the Tuckers, have to accept the easement, and they're not ready to do that. So it's our understanding it can't happen.
Yeah, that's without that, their approval or accepting it, I just can't see that we can allow partial 3. The other 2 is fine. I don't,
Miss,
1 and 2.
are you ready?
well, I was just going to mention, you
I'll wait for
might,
you.
depending on how this turns out tonight, you might check with your surveyor and to see whether a multi-use easement would work there, where the current use is benefiting somebody for a different purpose, and later it could have a different easement purpose that would benefit somebody else. You can assign easement interests. So I think if you talk creatively in those kinds of regards, you might be able to figure something out. I don't know for sure, but I suspect that you could figure something out that the county would record.
So if that's a possibility, could you give the applicant enough leeway to add a multi-use easement to his final plat if he can figure out a way to do it where the county will accept it. That would be in basically the same configuration, just named something different. And would that harm parcel, well, it wouldn't be parcel 3, it would be an easement. So would such an easement harm parcel 2 if it was to occur?
I would think we could have that in there as a, it's not necessarily a condition of approval, but a subsequent condition that he also would have the permission to lay an easement across. So I would have no problem with that if enough other people didn't have a problem with that.
That I could deal with if it came down to an easement situation.
So it wouldn't be a separate parcel, so
Right.
therefore, I mean, you can do lots
It
of...
would still do the same thing, but
Mhm.
I think that it would be better as an easement versus a parcel.
Mm-hmm.
Allow for an easement?
If he can figure out a way to...
That it's dedicated for an easement, and then that way, if he sells it to property to someone else, then there's not going to be a big problem there too.
We're talking an easement exactly where parcel 3 is
Three is.
located, okay.
But then again,
That's
if
the
it's
eastern
nothing
side,
done
right?
within 10 years,
No, it's the western side.
Yeah,
Can that-
I
can
mean,
that be
that's...
there for forever?
Well, I don't think we should worry about that. If for some reason that 10-year condition can't work out, that's going to be his problem.
That's a bigger issue there, because then it's just an easement.
but
I mean-
can you make that, what about that as far as tax is concerned? Is that considered a tax lot?
That's up to the county, and they
Yeah,
probably
see, that's
would.
what-
If you
yeah.
have a different...
And that's going to be a
Right.
problem
The
right
county
there.
can break any parcel of land into different tax lots. It does not necessarily mean that they are different lots of record. Right? Brian?
It wouldn't be a legal buildable lot of record.
Right.
Mhm.
It's just a
They
tax
County
lot.
can't do that without our approval.
A lot of people on timberland will do that. They will have their house on one tax lot and their trees on a different tax lot. So it's, but it's still all one parcel of land, one official legal parcel. I don't know if you can do that in the city. I've never seen that.
Yeah, I was going
but-
to say that's probably
Outside
outside of the
right.
county.
We just have lots
There's one
that
right here.
weren't approved or
This parking
below
lot is
minimum
not
lot
the same as
size that were
It's all one tax lot. It's different tax
recorded
lots.
back before we checked. Stuff like that.
So is there still?
I'm gonna give it a
We're
shot.
bouncing some ideas around. Let's see.
That's what we can keep talking. I'm ready to give it a shot if we're ready.
Go ahead. Any motions are always in order.
Mr. Chair, I propose a motion. I move that we approve minor land partition 13-03 pursuant to the conditions of approval presented in the staff report with the following exceptions. That we remove specifically condition 6, because it refers to parcel 3. In condition 5, that any reference to condition 3 or any other conditions that have a discussion of parcel 3 be removed, as parcel 3 would be removed from this partition. And that we add a following condition that covers and allows for an easement on the western edge of parcel 2 if the applicant is able to get the county to buy off on said action.
And about the waiving of any reapplication if you
Yes.
so choose to.
And please, yes, and to waive any reapplication requirements if he chooses to. Did I say that correctly?
The 1 year.
The 1
waive
year,
the 1
yes,
year.
thank you.
Mhm.
And what about the parcel 1?
And that, yes, and I also add that all parcels shall be divided to meet the minimum 7,000 foot standard as established in the code.
Well, I think that he's meeting the average. If he's just
Yes.
breaking it at 2, he's meeting the average.
Yes,
Because this parcel 1 still wouldn't be 7,000. Is that
Correct.
your plan?
Correct.
Okay. So it'd be the
thank you
average.
for clarifying, yes, that's exactly
You want
what I
them
meant.
to average or be both 7,000?
They need to meet the code's
7,000
average
average, okay.
7,000 foot requirement.
So there wouldn't be an express meandering of the lot line under that motion?
Correct.
Okay.
Parcel 3 is not there, then they would
the average would be over.
would be
so-
over.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have to
Parcel
change.
2 is already over, would be over 7.
So you wouldn't have to change to one of the alternative designs?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay, there's been a motion. Any questions about that motion, or
Yes, could you explain the details again, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Joyce, correct me if I'm wrong?
Do my best.
Okay, the motion would be to approve with the conditions laid out by staff, but those conditions would be modified in the interim to remove number 6 altogether. And with respect to condition number 5 and potentially any others that have a specific reference to parcel number 3, those would be modified appropriately. That would be an allowance of an easement along the eastern edge of parcel 2 if
The western.
western
Yeah.
edge of parcel 2 if the applicant can get the county to agree to do something, and that we'd be waiving the 1-year waiting period for reapplication for a partitioning if he should, within that amount of time, want to reapply for a partition of parcel 3 or something like that. So it needs a second before we could have a vote and or discussion.
I would second that.
Okay, Mr. Hensley seconds. We are now into discussion. Is there any discussion about that particular motion, the merits? Not saying, oh,
Mr. Chair, I have a question for the lady, the neighbor. What are your feelings in regard to this?
I mean, I'm fine with partition 1, I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm still, I don't know, but it makes me a little bit nervous having the easement going to the back part of that. I also talked with Peggy and about that and how they felt, and her understanding to me was that it was a easement back to her property, but they had no intention while they lived there of ever doing with it, and that I didn't need to worry about it.
That's why I'm having a
but,
problem with that.
But she said that, if her son got it, that might change, but it wouldn't be for a long time. So, I don't know. I mean, it just, like with any homeowner, it just makes you a little bit nervous. But I can understand that, that he's trying to do that. I just don't, that's why I bought the property and bought the property, because our lots were a little bit bigger chunk and we didn't have houses right over us. And there are, all along Maple on that side, all the lots are those big, long, all the way down. So it's not like it's the only one that's a big lot. So, but that's not mine. So, it makes me a little nervous, but.
ma'am, I'm gonna cut you off there, and I
Yep,
apologize.
okay.
I don't like to cut people off, but that was a little bit out of order. So now I am going to allow Mr. Bristol, if he'd like, to address any of that stuff, because we have a peculiar order of things, and the applicant always gets to have the last say on anything.
Oh,
And
that's
so
totally
public
fine, yeah.
comment is not limited. Did you have any response to that or anything? You at least have the opportunity, and it's on the record that you had the opportunity. Okay. So back to, if we do that kind of thing, it's during deliberation, particularly when we've closed public comment, we have to be careful, just so everybody knows that, the applicant would have a chance to rebut and have the last say about any factual
Certainly.
testimony that comes out.
Sure.
So back to the deliberation on Mr. Joyce's motion. Is there any other comments or discussions on that? Okay, I'm not hearing any discussion on Mr. Joyce's motion. I will call for the question. Then, all those in favor of the motion as presented by Mr. Joyce and seconded by Mr. Hensley signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Is there any abstentions? Okay, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was unanimous? Is that, okay, I didn't hear your voice. Okay, it was unanimously approved. Mr. Joyce's motion passes. It's approved with those conditions, sir. And we'll have findings next month.
Do you want to hold off on the findings
Yeah,
then?
not
Okay.
today, yeah. That's a little too much. You're a superwoman, but that's,
You might need the red one.
yeah. Okay, new business. Continuation of our concept street vendor ordinance. Brian, do you have any, do you want to maybe give us a brief recap of any changes and things that you or Angie did on this?
The only thing that I've added that I don't think you saw from the first meeting we had this last meeting is the very last page. I guess it's page 55. There's additional street vendor questions to consider. You had those on the other side of the sheet in your packet last time. And those are questions that actually were specific to City of Gresham when they were considering their ordinance this past year and a half when they were developing theirs. And then I thought of a few others that I wrote down and forgot to give them to you the last time. And the very last one on there, number 6, we got to talking about at the last meeting. It was about whether SDCs should be applicable to well, I guess what we're almost calling a permanent street vendor, because the whole premise of this was that we currently have a mobile vendor permitting ordinance, and that it's a temporary vendor ordinance for 90 days. But now we're talking about vendors that want to set up someplace, potentially on private property permanently, in their cart or their little building or on a truck that might sit on somebody's property and for more than 90 days. So I'm just kind of reiterating and reminding you that we have a temporary vendor ordinance. We don't have a permanent street vendor ordinance, or what we're just calling as a street vendor, to distinguish it from our temporary vendor right now. And what we have through other research, we do need to keep in mind the costs that would be involved to anyone, because it's not going to do us a whole lot of good if we get a new street vendor ordinance and they need to pay SDCs, they need a application fee that, could be over $1,000 or something. Because if that's the case, most of the research has shown we'll never get one. Because their whole premise is entrepreneurial activity that circumvents the capital investment that isn't ordinarily needed to build a brick and mortar building, et cetera, et cetera. And these are people that are trying to find a way to do a business without that initial high capital expense.
What if we did something along those lines? I like that idea. I mean, when I look at the real numbers here, it's not that much, but to charge it up front on day one before they can start, selling beef jerky or whatever, makes me think, okay, that would be the impediment to somebody starting it out and doing it. But what if we made it payable as soon as they were there longer than the temporary permit? So like they've got 90 days that they could be doing it. Temporary was 90 days, I think. Or?
90 days with
And then after that period, then that's when they actually have to pay it. Presumably they're staying there because they're making some money. They could then pay the fee.
Are you talking 90 days or after?
I don't know.
Or after the
some period of
extension?
time.
Extension, yeah, so that'd be 180 days.
So after
That
the 180
concept.
days, is that it? They can't ever come back here again? Or do they have to be gone for 6 months and then come back?
Yeah, they actually could do that under the temporary vendor ordinance. No more than 180 days out of a year. So
So they got
after-
6 months out of the year.
If they want more than that, then they got to pay the STC. That's what I was thinking. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not sure that I like that. I mean, Generally don't like taxes very much.
So my question is do we really need this? Because if you have a street vendor, 108, is it going to be nice 180 days out of the year? First off, but is it something? Are we going down a road that we don't need to go down? Because what I still see is I see us going a different direction than what we were asked to do in the first place. We were brought something that was totally bizarre for everybody in that we have a gentleman that wants to be able to manufacture something in his building that happens to be mobile, and now we're talking about the street vendor ordinance that I don't really see as pertinent to his situation. Plus, we already have an ordinance in place for that. And from what Mr. Brown was saying, we haven't really had people beating our door down for that in the first place. So I guess really where I'm at is this necessary or not?
He wasn't asking for something temporary though. He was asking for something permanent, right?
But he's not a street vendor to
He's
begin
not a
with.
vendor.
So to clarify that, because
He's a
Commissioner
processor.
Joyce wasn't here at that previous meeting, the rest of the planning commission pretty much agreed that we're going to handle the salsa mobile production manufacturing unit separate from this ordinance. It doesn't really seem to fit, and the reason is he's not having any customer come to his
Okay.
cart, to his manufacturing unit. And this whole premise by definition is someone that is selling or vending a product from their,
They're vending from the location
Yeah.
versus just manufacturing
yeah, so
something.
we
Okay.
decided
Gotcha.
that we were trying to morph this thing to fit them as well and do something broader. I think everybody decided that we're bending too much to try to make him fit. So we're gonna try to approach in a different ordinance, if we can.
Then let me try and do my role as chair and drive the conversation a little bit. Why don't we just debate the topic right now that Mr. Hensley just brought up? Do we want to continue refining, crafting, working on some code language, or do we want to just table this until there is more demand? I think that's the question that we should answer.
So, Mr. Chair, we had previously, when we were even talking about, when the commission was talking about the street vendors, we had even discussions as to whether or not we even wanted to have temporary vendors. I think the idea of a permanent vendor is probably stretching the bounds of what we intended to do in the first place. And I think, even the questions of 180 days was really, we had some pretty good arguments about that one. So I'm with Commissioner Hensley. I think we're going down a road that we don't need to be going down, first off, and I think we need to keep it to 180 days, and there's no reason we should have mobile temporary vendors doing anything other than that. And unless a need develops that somebody brings to our attention that we are completely unknowing of to, that's the only issue. I do have a question though for staff, not an issue but a question, with your additional questions, number 1 for street vendors with regards to public property. Is that regarding I didn't read the whole thing on the temporary ones to remind myself, but is that pertinent to the temporary ones as well?
The temporary vendor ordinance is specific only to private property.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
The main reason that I like this, I could go either way. I'm not diehard one way or the other on this, whether we continue to craft or whether we just table it forever. The main thing that makes me think that this could be something we'd want in the city is that it would, in essence, open up the possibility of new business concepts coming in and being placed on an existing piece of property quickly, easily to test it out and to get something started, whether it's making salsa or selling umbrellas or doing something else on a property that's, an approved use or whatever, but it's done in a mobile facility, if you will, more quickly and more easily. And that's the thing that I like, is that it gives us a little bit of a potential to have some business of some form more easily established than having to full-on move into a brick and mortar building.
Well, I agree with you, and I also, like the input we received from the Main Street manager last week, her support of it. If there was opposition there, then I might think differently. But based on your input and that, I like the entrepreneurial slant on it.
So I'd like, if there's, we can keep discussing this, or if somebody wants to, if there's a majority that wants to table it, or majority that wants to make a motion to keep crafting it, let's come to a decision on that, I think, and then move forward either, or not move forward, based on the outcome of that. So let's keep it to, do we continue to draft, or do we table it, and then we'll have a vote and move forward with our business?
Do you want an opinion or just, I would.
An opinion or a motion on
I would-
those two topics.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we table the entire issue of the street vendor.
I would second it.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to table the new business item of drafting street vendor ordinance. There's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion about that motion?
I had one question. Where does that leave our mobile manufacturing situation? Does that get pushed aside too, leaving that gentleman in limbo?
I don't know the answer to that. Brian, do you want, is there a final status on him?
Well,
or-
he has the opportunity as a home-based business. I'm not sure whether he's going to take advantage of that or not. He still feels uneasy about, but staff has given him that opportunity, that we would actually approve his business license if he wanted to do that.
So he does
So
have
from
a,
that standpoint, he's not really completely in limbo. But we are still contemplating trying to figure out another ordinance solution. At this point, I'm going to use all the brain power that the person sitting next to me said she was the one that kind of thought of accessory use or something like that, to see whether we can get to it in another way. And we'd just be concentrating on his use only, not all the street vendor stuff, to see if we can figure something out. We haven't had time to think about that yet. So we're still going to bring you back something that might handle those kind of things, so that he could make his arrangements with cuts for it.
Is there any way we could get him started under the temporary ordinance now?
We gave him that opportunity. He didn't want to take the risk of setting up operation on a temporary vendor
Fair enough.
basis, because
Yeah.
he said, hey, I'd get out there and have a market for my product, and all of a sudden, I could potentially be shut down in 6 months, because that's all the longer the temporary thing lasts. He said he didn't want to take that risk.
Okay, so the motion on the table, the motion on the floor is to table this as a new business item. Any other discussion on that motion to table? Okay. All those in favor of tabling this new business item signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. And I did abstain, mostly because I forgot to vote. But I think everybody else was tabled it. We will, item number 5 only had one agenda item, and that will be we will approve the written findings and decision on Mr. Bristol next month. And then we have to review item number 6, the approval of the minutes from last month. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from earlier this month, I guess it would technically be? The October 14th minutes.
Aye.
Is there-
I don't think I haven't even seen that one.
They're kind of at the back. They might be with your other stuff on the Bristol. They're at the very back of that. Or not. You wanna look at them? Is there a motion to approve or a motion to amend these? Or a motion to table?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion about that? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the October 14th, 2003 meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Okay, the minutes are approved.
I abstained. You guys have to approve them.
Were you here?
No,
Probably good too.
I didn't forget.
We're tricking you. We put a bunch of crazy things on there.
What's going on?
Okay, item number 7, staff report, items of interest.
Let me see. I may have mentioned before, we've started on the North Redwood master plan. And Matilda Diaz, our senior planner, is the project manager on that, and she's had her first meeting with the grantors that are helping fund this project, which includes the ODOT, since it's a TGM grant, which is a Transportation Growth Management Grant. ODOT is the actual project manager of this. And so there's a planner from ODOT that is helping lead this. And they've had their first meeting, and they're setting the kind of more detailed parameters on how they're going to approach setting up public input process and the timetable and schedule. And they're also setting up where we're going to focus the limited resources, the grant money that we have available, because the money, even though it's, I believe it's a $75,000 planning grant, the money doesn't go that far if you aren't careful. And so they're trying to figure out where we're going to need the most help. And they've already decided that they're going to divert some of the initial data gathering grunt work to staff so that the consultants can focus their attention on the most difficult part, which is resolving conflicts between property owners towards the latter part of the process, which we know will be inevitable, and helping resolve those conflicts later on, because that's where this process has slipped up in the past when we've tried to do it.
Brian, when you say the North Redwood project, are you actually talking Redwood Street? Or are you talking more
It's
Sequoia?
everything on the east side of North Redwood that is currently outside of the city limit boundaries.
Okay.
So there'd be some annexation.
Yeah, there wouldn't be annexation with this. It's a master plan that will then allow annexations to come forward and those property owners to know how they're going to have to develop their property
Okay.
once it's annexed.
So that whole section looks like probably right to the north of the, what do they call that? House over the neighborhood over there?